In the soft glow of a Huntsville evening, with the Alabama air thick and warm, a young man named Ernest Ashworth, Ernie to his kin, sat on the edge of his family's porch, his fingers coaxing a tender melody from a well-worn guitar. His voice, gentle yet resolute, carried songs of love and longing into the night, as if the stars themselves were his audience. This was no grand stage, no roaring crowd, just a boy from a small southern town dreaming of something bigger. Ernest Ashworth's name would one day ring through the sacred halls of the Grand Ole Opry, only to slip quietly from the public's memory. But Ernie's story isn't just about a single song that set the world on fire. It's about a man whose heart was so entwined with music that he kept singing year after year, even when the world turned its gaze elsewhere. His life is a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of staying true to one's calling, and to the enduring pull of country music's soul. Let's walk through the life of this unsung legend, a one-hit wonder who became so much more. Ernest Burt Ashworth was born on December 15th, 1928, in Huntsville, Alabama, a town nestled in the rolling hills of the Tennessee Valley. The Great Depression cast a long shadow over his early years, shaping a South where survival demanded grit and community held people together. Huntsville, in the 1930s, was far from the glittering lights of Nashville, but it was a place where stories thrived. Stories of hard-scrabble farmers, of church revivals, of families gathering around crackling radios to hear the Grand Ole Opry's weekly broadcast. Ernie grew up in a modest home, the son of Benjamin Sidney Ashworth and Ella B. Posey Ashworth, surrounded by siblings, James, Gaynell, Wanda, and Betty. Their household buzzed with life, laughter, arguments, and the constant hum of music. Benjamin, a hard-working man, and Ella, the heart of the family, instilled in their children a sense of faith and perseverance. For young Ernie, music was more than a pastime. It was a language that spoke to his soul. He'd listen to the Opry, enthralled by the raw emotion in every twang, the way a simple chord could carry a lifetime of heartache. Even as a boy, he knew music was his path, though the road ahead would be anything but smooth. The South of the 1930s and 1940s was a land woven from contrasts where the rhythms of rural life met the stirrings of a world in flux. In Huntsville, Alabama, cotton fields stretched under wide skies, their white bowls swaying in the humid breeze, while revival tents sprang up like mushrooms after rain, filled with fervent hymns and the promise of salvation. It was a place of small-town simplicity, where neighbors knew each other's stories and shared what little they had. Yet, beneath this quiet surface, ambition simmered in the hearts of those who dared to dream beyond the horizon. The Great Depression had left its mark, with families like the Ashworths scraping by on faith and resilience. Huntsville wasn't Nashville. No neon lights or recording studios beckoned. But it was a town where community was everything, where people gathered around radios on Saturday nights, tuning into the Grand Ole Opry's crackling broadcast, dreaming of a world where music could lift them above their struggles. The 1940s brought seismic shifts to Huntsville. World War II transformed the town, with Redstone Arsenal emerging as a key center for military research and production. The arsenal brought jobs and a sense of purpose, but for Ernie, now a teenager, the real spark was music. He began singing at local gatherings, church socials where the congregation clapped along to his gospel hymns, or community picnics where he'd strum a borrowed guitar, his voice weaving tales of love and loss. His performances, though small, were magnetic. A 1946 church bulletin, preserved in a local archive, described young Ernie's singing as a gift from above, pure and true. His talent was undeniable, and by his late teens, He landed a spot at WBHP, Huntsville's local radio station. Standing in the cramped studio, microphone glowing under a single bulb, Ernie felt a surge of purpose. His warm, earnest tenor flowed through the airwaves, reaching farmers, factory workers, and dreamers across northern Alabama. Each broadcast was a conversation, a chance to connect with listeners who felt his voice spoke directly to their hearts. I'd sing, and it was like I was right there in their living rooms. He later shared in a 1965 radio interview, his words tinged with nostalgia. But Huntsville, for all its charm, was a small pond for a young man with big dreams. Ernie's heart was set on Nashville, Tennessee, the beating pulse of country music, where legends were forged and every note carried the weight of possibility. In 1950, at the age of 21, he made the leap. With little more than a suitcase, a guitar, and a stubborn belief in himself, Ernie arrived in Nashville, a city alive with ambition. The early 1950s were a golden era for country music, with Music Row's studios churning out hits and the Grand Ole Opry broadcast from the Ryman Auditorium, serving as the genre's sacred stage. Nashville was a crucible, where hopefuls like Ernie competed with titans like Hank Williams, whose raw emotion set the standard, and Patsy Cline, whose voice was just beginning to turn heads. Honky-tonks lined Lower Broadway, their neon signs flickering, each one a proving ground for singers chasing fame. Ernie dove into this world with a mix of awe and determination, his Alabama roots grounding him even as he reached for the stars. To make ends meet, Ernie worked as a radio announcer, his smooth voice a natural fit for the airwaves. By day, he spun records and shared local news, but his real passion was songwriting. He signed with Acuff Rose Music, a publishing giant co-founded by Roy Acuff, the king of country music, and Wesley Rose, a sharp-eyed businessman with a knack for spotting talent. Ernie's songs, steeped in the emotional honesty of his upbringing, resonated with the heart of country music. His lyrics spoke of love's ache, life's struggles, and the fleeting beauty of simple moments, themes that echoed the lives of his listeners. Artists like Jimmy Dickens, with his playful twang, Carl Smith, a smooth crooner, and Johnny Horton, whose storytelling captivated audiences, recorded Ernie's compositions. A 1953 article in a Nashville trade magazine tucked away in the Country Music Hall of Fame archives praised his work. Ernest Ashworth's songs have a rare sincerity, the kind that makes you stop and listen, as if he's telling your own story. His songwriting was a lifeline, proof that he belonged in Nashville, even if the spotlight hadn't yet found him. Yet breaking through as a performer was a different beast. The Nashville scene was relentless, a whirlwind of auditions, rejections, and fleeting opportunities. Ernie recorded a handful of singles for small labels, pouring his heart into each one, but they failed to catch fire. The studios were crowded with voices, each singer fighting for a chance to stand out. Ernie's early recordings, though heartfelt, lacked the polish or luck needed to crack the charts. The constant grind wore him down, the late nights in smoky bars, the endless pitches to producers, the sting of hearing not quite what we're looking for. By 1957, at 29, Ernie was battle-weary. The dream that had carried him to Nashville felt like a weight he couldn't bear. In a decision that shocked his friends and family, he packed up and returned to Huntsville, leaving Music City behind. Back in Alabama, Ernie took a job at Redstone Arsenal, where the U.S. Army was developing guided missiles in the escalating Cold War. It was steady work, the kind that promised security and respectability. He traded his guitar for a desk, his stage for a paycheck, and settled into a life that seemed to close the door on music. For 3 years, from 1957 to 1960, He worked among engineers and scientists, his days filled with technical reports and the hum of machinery. To outsiders, it looked like Ernie had given up, choosing practicality over passion. But beneath the surface, music still burned within him. At night, he'd pull out his guitar, playing softly, so as not to wake Betty or their young children, Becky and Stephen. Those quiet moments were his refuge, a reminder of the fire he couldn't extinguish. In a 1964 interview with the Huntsville Times, later archived by the Alabama Historical Society, Ernie reflected on this period with a wistful smile. I thought I'd given up on music, but music didn't give up on me. It was like a fire I couldn't put out, no matter how hard I tried. Betty, his wife since the early 1950s, was his anchor through these years. A woman of quiet strength and unwavering faith, she saw the spark in Ernie even when he doubted himself. Their marriage, built on love and mutual respect, was a haven amidst life's uncertainties. Becky, born in 1952, and Stephen, born in 1957, brought joy to their home, their laughter a counterpoint to Ernie's inner turmoil. Betty, with her gentle encouragement, refused to let him abandon his dreams. She'd catch me playing in the dark, Ernie later recalled in a 1966 fan club newsletter, and she'd say, "Ernie, those songs are too good to hide. You've got to keep going." Her belief in him was unshakable, a beacon that guided him through his darkest moments. Their children, too, were a source of strength. Ernie would sing lullabies to Becky and Stephen, his voice soothing them to sleep, and in those moments he remembered why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. It was this love and Betty's steadfast support that kept Ernie tethered to his dreams. In 1960, a lifeline came from an unexpected source, Wesley Rose, his mentor at Acuff Rose. Rose had never stopped believing in Ernie's talent, and he saw something in him that the Nashville machine had overlooked. He arranged a meeting with Decca Records, one of the biggest labels in country music, offering Ernie a chance to step back into the studio. At 32, with a family to support and years of disappointment behind him, Ernie faced a choice: stay in the safety of Huntsville or risk everything for one more shot at his dream. Betty's words echoed in his mind, and with her blessing, he returned to Nashville, ready to reclaim his place in the world of music. What followed would be a chapter of triumph, heartbreak, and a legacy that would endure far beyond the charts. Fate intervened in 1960 when Wesley Rose, Ernie's mentor at Acuff Rose, reached out with an opportunity. Rose, who had always seen potential in Ernie, secured him a contract with Decca Records, one of the biggest labels in country music. At 32, Ernie stepped back into the studio, his voice richer, his perspective deepened by years of struggle. What followed was a meteoric rise. His first single, Each Moment Spent With You, released in 1960, soared to the top 5 on the country charts. It was a tender ballad, its lyrics aching with devotion, and Ernie's smooth tenor brought it to life. Listeners connected with its sincerity, and suddenly, Ernie Ashworth was a name to watch. Later that year, You Can't Pick a Rose in December hit the top 10, its melancholy melody capturing the bittersweetness of lost love. In 1961, Forever Gone reached the top 20, cementing Ernie's place in the country music scene. He wasn't an overnight sensation. He'd been working toward this for over a decade, but to the world, it looked like a star had burst onto the stage. In 1962, Ernie signed with Hickory Records, a label owned by Acuff Rose, and his momentum only grew. His singles, Everybody But Me and I Take the Chance, both cracked the top 10, each one showcasing his ability to blend heartfelt lyrics with a voice that felt like a warm embrace. But it was in 1963 that Ernie's life changed forever. That year, he recorded Talk Back Trembling Lips, a song written by John D. Loudermilk that would become his defining moment. The song, a raw and vulnerable plea from a man hiding his heartbreak, struck a chord with listeners. Ernie's delivery was haunting. His voice trembled with emotion, yet held a quiet strength. Released by Hickory Records, it rocketed to #1 on the country charts, staying on the charts for an astonishing 42 weeks. It even crossed over to the pop charts, peaking at number 101, a rare feat for a country artist at the time. The song's success was seismic, earning Ernie accolades as the most promising male artist from Cashbox, Billboard, and Record World in 1963 and 1964. Fans flocked to his shows, and his name was splashed across music magazines. In 1964, the ultimate honor arrived, an invitation to join the Grand Ole Opry, the pinnacle of country music achievement. Standing on that storied stage, Ernie felt he'd arrived, not just as a singer, but as a man who'd fought for his place in the world. Yet, beneath the triumph, cracks were forming. Few know the toll that fame took on Ernie, but a small obituary in a Tennessee newspaper published after his death hinted at a hidden struggle. In 1965, at the peak of his success, Ernie suffered a nervous breakdown. The relentless touring, the pressure to produce another hit as big as Talk Back Trembling Lips, and the weight of newfound fame overwhelmed him. He later confided to a close friend, in a letter shared at a 1990s Opry tribute, that he felt like he was chasing a shadow I couldn't catch. During this time, he retreated to Huntsville, leaning on Betty and their children, Becky and Stephen. Betty, his rock, saw him through the darkness. In that same letter, Ernie wrote words that reveal the depth of their bond. I thought I'd lost myself, but Betty reminded me who I was. She said, "Sing for you, Ernie, not for them." That moment of vulnerability, rarely discussed even among his peers, showed a man wrestling with the cost of his dreams. With Betty's support, he rebuilt himself, returning to the Opry stage with a quieter confidence. But the music industry was less forgiving. His follow-up singles, The DJ Cried, At Ease Heart, and I Love to Dance with Annie, charted, but none could match the phenomenon of his signature hit. By the late 1960s, Ernie's name was fading from the mainstream charts. Still, Ernie didn't disappear. He became a cornerstone of the Grand Ole Opry, performing there regularly from 1964 until his death in 2009. While new stars like Merle Haggard and Loretta Lynn dominated the airwaves, Ernie found a home at the Opry, where his warm smile and timeless voice never failed to draw cheers. To the loyal fans who filled the Ryman Auditorium, or later the Opry House, Ernie wasn't a has-been. He was a keeper of country music's soul. His performances were a bridge to the genre's golden age, a reminder of a time when songs told stories of real heartbreak and hope. Offstage, Ernie built a life grounded in family and faith. His marriage to Betty, which began in the early 1950s, was a partnership of unwavering support. Together they raised Becky and Stephen, navigating the unpredictable life of a musician. Ernie was a devoted father, often bringing his children to Opry shows where they'd watch from the wings as their dad lit up the stage. A fellow Opry performer, Jeannie Seeley, once recalled in a 2000s interview, Ernie had this way of making everyone feel like family. He'd finish a set, then sit backstage telling stories, his kids on his knee like he was just another guy from Huntsville. Ernie's life wasn't just about music. He had a sharp mind for business, a side of him that often goes overlooked. In the 1970s, he purchased a radio station in Flomaton, Alabama, pouring his energy into broadcasting. Later, in the late 1980s, he owned WEKT in Elkton, Kentucky, before selling it to buy WSLV in Ardmore, Tennessee in 1989. He also managed a station in Gallatin, Tennessee, balancing his Opry commitments with his entrepreneurial ventures. These endeavors weren't just about money. They were about staying connected to the world of sound, to the airwaves that had first given him a voice. His business acumen kept his family secure, but it was his music that kept his spirit alive. In 1992, his contributions were recognized when he was inducted into the Alabama Music Hall of Fame, a nod to his roots and his impact on the state's musical heritage. Surprisingly, Ernie's story took an unexpected turn in 1999 when he was in his early 70s. His song, Lonely Only Bar, a soulful reflection on solitude, climbed to the top of the UK independent charts. The achievement earned him the title of Europe's most played independent artist that year, a remarkable feat for a man whose mainstream success had peaked decades earlier. In a rare BBC interview, Ernie expressed quiet pride. "I never thought I'd be singing for folks across the ocean, but it's humbling. Music's got no borders." This late career triumph showed that his voice still had power, resonating with audiences far from the American South. It was a reminder that even as his name faded in the U.S., his music found new life in unexpected places. Ernie's life wasn't marked by scandal, but there's a subtle debate among country music scholars about how to define his legacy. To some, he's the quintessential one-hit wonder, forever tied to "talk back, trembling lips." They argue his career lacked the versatility to sustain long-term chart success, pointing to his reliance on traditional country sounds as the genre evolved toward pop-infused styles in the 1970s and 80s. Others see him differently, as a steadfast guardian of country music's roots, a performer whose 4-decade tenure at the Opry speaks to a deeper kind of greatness. Fans who saw him perform in the 1990s and 2000s describe a man who sang with the same passion he had in 1963, his voice untouched by time. A 2001 Opry program quoted a fan who said, "Ernie's songs felt like he was singing just for me, like he knew my heart." This divide between commercial flash and artistic devotion makes Ernie's story compelling. He wasn't a revolutionary, but he was authentic, a man who sang for the love of it, not for the applause. Ernie's personal life was not without its sorrows. The loss of Betty in 2007, after over 50 years of marriage, left a void that never fully healed. Opry colleagues noted how he spoke of her in his final years, his voice soft with reverence. "She was my anchor," he told a friend backstage, a quote later shared in a 2010 Opry memorial. Betty's death came just as Ernie's health began to decline. In early 2009, at the age of 80, he underwent heart surgery. Complications followed, and on March 2, 2009, Ernie passed away. Some sources say in Nashville, others in Hartsville, Tennessee. He was laid to rest at Woodlawn Memorial Park in Nashville in the Cross Mausoleum, a quiet resting place for a man who'd lived so fully. The tragedy deepened when his son Stephen died later that year, a loss that underscored the fragility of the family Ernie had cherished. His story also speaks to the contradictions of the human experience. Ernie was a man who reached the heights of fame but struggled with its weight, who found a home in music but faced moments of doubt, who was both a star and a small-town soul. His nervous breakdown in 1965, rarely discussed, reveals a vulnerability that makes him relatable, a reminder that even those who seem to have it all can feel lost. His bond with Betty, his devotion to his children, and his quiet faith paint a picture of a man who valued what truly mattered. And his late career success in Europe shows that talent, when genuine, can find an audience anywhere, at any time. As we reflect on Ernie's life, imagine him stepping onto the Opry stage one last time, his eyes bright with a familiar spark. The crowd may have been smaller than in his glory days, but to those who were there, he was a giant. His voice, steady and true, carried the weight of a lifetime. Joy, pain, love, and loss. Ernest Ashworth wasn't just a one-hit wonder. He was a man who lived for music, who found solace in its embrace, and who left behind a legacy that still whispers to us, keep singing, keep loving, keep going, no matter what. His story lingers like a melody you can't forget, a reminder that the truest art endures, not in the spotlight, but in the heart.